It's an appropriate surname, isn't it? I'd like to start tonight by sharing a story with you, and it's about my mum. For most of my mum's adult life, she battled depression and anxiety, but things got really bad for her when she was in her mid-50s. She was hospitalised on a number of occasions, experiencing chronic mental health episodes, and she tried to take her life several times. She ended up losing her job and was living in a caravan park, really struggling to make ends meet. And more than anything, she was extremely isolated. She didn't really have any friends and not a big support network. She told me that the mornings were always the worst for her. She'd wake with anxiety, knowing that she had a whole day of nothingness ahead of her. And she was more than just bored. She felt that her life lacked meaning. And 5 years ago, my mum chose to end her life, and I was 26 at the time. Mental illness will affect 1 in 2 of us. That's half the room in our lifetimes. And suicide is one of the leading causes of death in this country. It's higher than the road toll, yet we don't talk about it as often. And the stigma attached to it can have really dire consequences for all of us. But I looked to the strengths of my mum and in the moments when she was well, and through the ups and downs of dealing with the mental illness and feeling like her life was falling apart, there was one constant, and that was gardening. And gardening, more than anything else, was where my mum seemed to draw strength from. And through undertaking research, I discovered something called horticultural therapy, which is basically gardening for well-being. It's huge in North America and in Europe, where it's practiced on farms through a concept known as social farming. So sitting in all of this knowledge of my mum's experience and the gaps in her care, and of knowing where she found strength, also knowing that she's definitely not the only one to experience this, I knew with every fibre of my being that I had to do something about it, and so I started Growing Change. And at Growing Change, we do those 2 things. We use horticultural therapy and social farming to connect people who are socially isolated, mentally unwell, and generally in need of a hand. Earlier this year, we partnered with one of the largest social housing providers in WA, Foundation Housing, and we received a grant through Partners in Recovery to pilot our horticulture programs at a men's lodging house in Mount Lawley. The guys that live there, they all have some form of chronic physical or mental illness. They're extremely isolated and are in the high risk category for suicide. And when we started gardening, one of the residents, Dave, told us that sometimes he feels so lonely and depressed that he doesn't eat. And Dave is 66, and he is now always the first one in the garden waiting for us to arrive. And during our lunch breaks, he slams down 3 to 4 salad sandwiches. It's pretty impressive. It's not, gardening is pulling people out of their rooms. We've got a bunch of guys that are talking to each other about stuff, they're talking about feelings, they're connecting, and the garden's physically growing veggies, but it's doing much more than that. It's growing confidence in people. People are feeling valued in their contribution, and they're taking pride in what we've created together. I've personally seen the gap in recovery, and I've seen a real solution in our model. And the feedback that we're getting is that our program is excellent and people are really engaging. However, it is just going to end. And this is where the Fremantle Social Farm comes in, and it's the reason why we're here tonight. Fremantle Social Farm is a commercial market garden. It's located on a vacant bowling green in North Fremantle. The farm will be the base for the delivery of our 12-week social horticulture program, and it will also be our headquarters. We work closely with referral partners, and we can take up to 60 people per year through our program. After the 12 weeks, people have an opportunity to rent a plot in the garden, and they can continue harvesting produce for personal use or to establish a micro-business. And for me, this is actually really one of the most exciting parts of this project, is that people who are otherwise unemployed have an opportunity to gain an income through growing produce, which we sell through our customer networks. And we've completed financial modelling for 123 crops. It was a lot of Excel spreadsheets to get there. And we've selected our top 10 and top 3 based on market demand and profitability. We only needed 1 restaurant customer to get going, and we've got 3 that have signed up and a wait list of over 10 in Fremantle alone. So we are actively looking for more land. And if you can help us out tonight, please come and talk to me afterwards. I'd love to chat to you about that. The reality is the more we grow, the more we can help people. And tonight we're asking for your help to get growing. We've got 10 tonnes of compost from the Perth Zoo, and we've got customers waiting, we've got people waiting to garden with us. For $10,000 we'll be able to sow our first seed of crop and install irrigation. However, for $15,000 we will also be able to purchase row covers, which are a really important part of our business model because it provides shade in summer and heat in winter, and that extends the growing season for our crops, which means we can sell produce into the market when demand is high and supply is low, which commands a higher price, feeding that money back into the delivery of our programs. And for $69,000 it costs us to set up this whole farm, which generates and will generate a revenue of over $250,000 per year. It's a pretty great return on your investment. There is a massive gap in support for people like my mum and Dave who are experiencing mental illness and social isolation, and that gap is connection to community and pathways to employment. And tonight, by raising your hand in support of Growing Change, you'll be helping us to fill that gap between when somebody's crying out for help and before it's too late.